Hey there, pre-algebra guys. We are in 10.8 and we are fixing to finish up chapter 10. On Monday we'll have one more section and then we'll be done with it. And then we'll move on to chapter 11 and 12 and you will be done for 7th grade. So today is pretty much review, and we are not going to go into too much more. Now, not review from our year, but should be review from your previous educational experience. So we're going to go through it rather quickly. Please read through the book, watch this over again. If there are other videos or if you want me to give you some other resources, if you're struggling a little bit, please reach out. I'd be happy to get that stuff to you. But I also don't want to go over something that you really know and could just kind of whip through rather quickly. I know time is, you have so many things to get to, right? So many, maybe you have a lot of things to get to. Sometimes I feel like we don't really have a lot right now, but still it's good to get school out of the way, right? All right, so today's talking about probability. We've got some vocabulary to talk about here. If we have an experiment, that's literally just the occurrence leading to an outcome. It is the spinning of the spinner on the wheel. It is the pulling a marble out of the jar, all of the typical probability situations, right? Sample space, that just means what are all my possibilities. So what is the sample space of this spinner? Well, I have red, white, green, and yellow, right? That's the sample space. Those are all of the possibilities. Am I going to get all of those? No, I don't know that for sure. I might only ever get one of them, but those are my possibilities. My trial is one observance. So if I actually took this and spun it around, and I don't know how to do that on here. So if I took that and spun it around, that's one trial. The outcome is what I get from that trial. So let's say it lands on red like it's shown. Well, if I said, hey, I spun this spinner and I spun a red, I had a 25% chance of that, all of the things we could look at, well, that's my outcome, right? And the event is a possible outcome of a trial. So yellow is a possible outcome of trial. That's an event, right? And it could be a possible outcome, could be any of those colors. Okay. Now, what's a little bit different is that we have kind of a new marking. We're going to write it as P of E, which just means probability of an event. So when you see this, it's the probability, and then what is the probability that you would get red? Well, this is divided into 4. We're assuming equal parts. So the probability of this event would be 0.25, or we know 1/4 as a decimal. We had those memorized. You're going to take the number of favorable outcomes, which are the ones we wanted. We wanted red. How many reds are out there? Well, 1, right? Over how many possible? So we could have 1 red one, and there are 4 possible outcomes. Now, they're not all red. We wanted red. So P of red is equal to 1/4, or 0.25. So that's how we kind of do that. I know that you understand this probably for the most part from the past, but I just want you to recognize this is the new way we're going to write it, okay? And it's just a little more algebraic. There's really nothing different about what's actually happening. All right, so back to cookies. I was inspired by Monday's cookie conversation here. So let's say these were my cookies, and I want to know, hey, what is the probability? Let's say all my cookies were in a jar, right? Or I went up to the counter at a store pre-COVID so that I could actually go to the counter and buy this cookie. And I said, oh, just give me whatever you have, one of something. Let's say I didn't care. So they pulled one out of their cupboard, right? It would be at random. And so what is the probability of getting a chocolate chip cookie? Well, I need to know a little bit more information, right? Now on this other page we talked about the possible of favorable outcomes. That's the possibility of getting what's in parentheses at E. Well, in this case, it's chocolate chips. What's the probability of getting chocolate chips? How many chocolate chip cookies are there to choose from? Well, 15. But I don't know the possible number of outcomes yet because I want to know what are all the different, how many cookies are there, right, to be chosen from? Well, I'm going to have to add those up. And that gives me 40. So this gives me 15 out of 40, or as a decimal, and I want you to give your answers as a decimal. Oh, that's a 3. 375.375. So that would be the answer for this. Okay. Now you could leave it as a fraction. I think in your homework you're going to need to give the answer as a fraction and as a rounded to the nearest 100th decimal. And this is hundredths, right? Tenths. Hundredths. I didn't really do hundredths. This is If I were to round this to the nearest hundredth, it would be 0.8. I did thousandths, okay? On your homework, you'll just need 2 numbers after the decimal. All right. Well, let's just try a couple more. This really is going to be a short video. We'll let you loose to try these out. On your assessment tomorrow, there will be a couple of problems like this. You'll need to make sure you find the total. Outside of that, you'll be fine. Now, what if I said the probability of a cookie without chocolate, a non-chocolate cookie, right? Well, I basically have to say, okay, I still know there's 40, but how many of these don't have chocolate in them? Well, chocolate chip cookie does have chocolate. So I'm going to have to look between these, and that gives me 25, right? 17, 20, 25. Okay? So sometimes you'll have to add them up and decide, okay, which are the events that are probable? It may not just list it. It may not say P of chocolate chip, right? You might have to say, which ones fall in that category? It might be an even number or an odd number. Okay, so you have to count up how many of those possibilities are indeed there. And so in this case, 25 40ths would give me about 0.625. But if we were to be rounding to the nearest hundredth, we would say 0.63. Alrighty, here's a jar, and here are some marbles, and you will notice this is something from your homework, so pay attention, write these down. Okay, now if all my marbles were in the jar, let's move my marbles into the jar. I just kind of set them on top of each other here a little bit. Alright, if my marbles sat in this jar, and I pulled one out at random, let's say I shook it up so that they all kind of were sitting in there. I want to know, what is my probability of getting a green? What is the probability that I would pull a red? And what is the possibility or the probability that I would pull a yellow? All right, now we're going to set this up in fractional form, but before we do that, we need to know what's in the denominator of each one, right? And that is our total number of marbles. All we're doing is we're pulling one out. We are really not getting into too much depth. We'll get into 10.9 about independent and dependent probability a little bit, but you've probably done, I know even in 5th grade last year we did probability much more difficult than this. We're just touching on it because you've had so much. Okay, so probability, let's see. We had 6 red marbles. There were 5 yellow marbles, and are there 4? 1, 2, 3, 4 green marbles. Okay, so that gives me 15. So there are 15 total marbles. So that's already going to be my denominator on all of my fractions. And I have 6 red marbles. I had 5 yellow marbles, and I had 4 green marbles. Now, I do want to give my number when you, actually I think it's multiple choice on your assessment, so you don't have to worry about that. Again, on homework, I think you're going to be giving it as a fraction and as a decimal. So in this case, this is not the fraction I want. I would like you to simplify it. Actually, that is the fraction I want. You can't simplify that one. You can simplify down here, though, right? So 5/15 is a fraction, but that's not what I want. I would like you to say 1/3, and we know that decimal to be 0.3 repeating. 6/15, you could divide both of those by 3. You could simplify that. You could have 2/5, and you guys remember 2/5 as a decimal. I'm going to try to get myself a little bit more space here. Okay, so 2/5 as a decimal would be 0.4, and 4/15. Now you could add these up and recognize this is going to be the difference between those, but we'll round it to the nearest hundredth, and this would be 0.27. Okay, that is really it for today. Try your homework, do your best, check your work. Make sure you take a look at exactly what they're asking. Slow down, check over, read carefully, decide. I think on number 17 it says represent, X represents the number of lanes drawn, and you have 1 through 6, and you just want to pick which lanes are odd. So if they're numbered, you have basically numbers 1 through 6, pick the odd ones, and of course that is probably half of them, right? So even odd, if you have consecutive numbers without skipping any, is pretty simple. Okay? All right, well, miss you guys. Good luck on your assessment. We'll catch you next week.